Hi and welcome to ChangeTalks, interviews that spread ideas, and in this edition I am talking to Nick Kemp. Now Nick is the creator of Provocative Changeworks, an approach to therapy that utilizes three elements to create change in an individual. One is provoking through verbal and non-verbal interaction, another is hypnosis, and then finally time framing. His approach is very much in demand around the world, and is always keen to demonstrate the effectiveness of it by working with actual clients to his groups. One of the things you'll notice about how Nick brands himself both online and in products is that it is always presented in a quality way, and this interview goes into why he feels branding is so important. Never shy to be controversial, Nick has frequently voiced his concerns about the substandard development of some within therapy, most notably within NLP, and in this interview it is no different. You'll get a lot of quality points from this interview, so I hope you enjoy it.
Well, I've had an excellent morning. I had a 2-hour guitar lesson this morning with Martin Simpson, one of the world's best guitarists. So I'm in a very fine mood.
Oh, brilliant. How long have you been doing guitar for?
Oh, well, proper lessons a few years, but I've had instruments for, best part of 30 plus years.
So you're quite the musician then?
Well, it's one thing having an instrument, it's another thing being a musician. But I have more of a disposable income in this day and age to be able to afford all the things I yearned after in days gone by.
Yeah, and imagine your skills improve playing with one of the world's best guitarists.
Well, hang around smart, capable people, and then, pretty much it tends to rub off to some degree.
Well, thanks a lot for doing this interview. I really appreciate it. And let's get going with this interview.
Sure, far away. I got your questions, but ask me anything you want.
Brilliant. Okay, well, if we start with the first question then. You're known currently for your approach called Provocative Changeworks, and I was wondering whether you can begin to talk about how that approach has evolved from when you first began to what you now call that Provocative Changeworks.
Okay, well, the first question is when I first began what? And just to sort of backpedal a little bit, a lot of people know me for background in NLP, hypnosis, through the Human Alchemy series of CDs that came out from around 2000.
Yeah.
I got interested in NLP in the late 90s and trained with Bandler, McKenna, etc. in London. But what a lot of people don't know is that from 1980 right through till the 90s, I was already doing workshops internationally on meditation, personal development, a whole bunch of other things, state-related stuff. So my background goes back to really around 1980.
Okay.
The interest in NLP came about because at that time I was working in the corporate sector, mostly in recruitment, sales, and marketing sectors. And we found it horrendously hard to find and recruit good members of staff. So I was very much involved in the training and had an interest in communication and how you improve communication, because that whole industry is all about meeting deadlines, influence, persuasion, and it's all about getting results. I also come from a family of journalists, so my whole background with my family's from the media, so I was brought up with media, communication, interactions, influence, all these different things.
Okay.
So the NLP stuff came from the 90s, and I'd already been interested in hypnosis. And at the same time I was sort of investigating Richard Bandler's stuff, I was looking into people like Stephen Brooks, who's an Ericksonian hypnosis guy.
Yeah.
And had an interest in sort of like a lot of philosophical stuff, all kinds of questioning approaches. The Provocative Changeworks model really started to evolve after I saw Frank Farrelly in 2004. And on the Bournemouth South Coast, I think it was 17 of us turned up for this workshop for Frank, who none of us thought was teaching, never mind in the UK. And that's when I met for the first time not only Frank, but I also hooked up with Andy Austin, who was in the same workshop for 4 days. And I'd already trained with Richard Bandler at this point for about 5 years. And not only had I done all the standard courses, which is a bit like sort of collecting scout badges. You know, first we do the practitioner, now we do the master practitioner, now we do the meta master practitioner.
And you've got all of them.
There's always another one somewhere, you know, the megalomaniac master mega practitioner. So I'd done a lot of those, and I'd also assisted on a shed load of courses from around 2000 to 2003. So I'd done lots of pracs, lots of master pracs. Bandler and McKenna at that time were also doing a whole bunch of hypnosis workshops, which they did for a period. So I had exposure to a lot of different trainings from these guys. When I met Frank, this was something quite different. Frank, in many ways, is a complete antithesis of stereotypical NLP. There's no grinding rock music, whooping applause. There's just Frank basically working in an essentially conversational but also very provocative, multi-layered way. And my initial impression of Frank was, it's a bit like if you've ever seen the Raiders from the Lost Ark series. In the third film, Sean Connery turns up, who is Harrison Ford's dad.
Yes.
Frank was a bit like Bandler's dad, in that I'm thinking, oh my God, there's so many similarities here between what Richard does, yet Frank was doing what he does 12 years before NLP even turned up.
Right, okay.
When Bandler and Grinder first met Frank Farrelly at a conference called Analyzing the Analyst, Bandler then got Frank over for 2 days for a whole weekend and videoed an entire workshop, and then began to take all kinds of elements of what Frank does, and you see that very clearly demonstrated in a lot of NLP. Both myself, Andy Austin, and also Jamie Smart was at this 2004 workshop. We all commented massively on the similarities between Frank and Richard. Of course, Frank being around for a lot longer.
Yes. So when you kind of decided what bits you would take to make your provocative change work, did you find that you were edging more towards the provocative therapy, or did you still keep parts of the NLP and the hypnosis and things?
To start with, there was no real obvious intention in creating something completely different. I mean, my interest in working with Frank was really to explore and study his work. You know, I'm known in my blog for people often talk to me about bashing NLP, and I continually repeat that it's not NLP, it's that I'm questioning. It's the behaviors that some people have, and the idea that within just a few weeks training you suddenly become hugely equipped to be able to see private clients, paid clients, give advice, and pronounce yourself as one of the few geniuses that walk the planet. You know, the development of Provocative Change Works came about because about 2 years later, in 2006, I was asked to go into BBC Radio Leeds and to talk about what they asked me about originally then, was working with NLP and working with people with phobias, anxiety states, and that kind of thing. And from an initial 1 hour session, that turned out to be a 26-week consecutive series of working live on the air with people that they provided who had various problems. I started to listen back to some of these sessions because my condition for doing this was to make sure that I had audio recordings of everything, because this would always be good publicity for future times. And I was listening back to a couple of the sessions. When you only have an hour to work with someone, you really don't have much time. And if you're then going on live on the air to, at that time, around 50,000 people listening, you really don't want the client to say, well, I feel worse than when I started when I saw that nice Mr. Kemp. So it was really important to do a very, very good job. When I listened back to the sessions, I thought, God almighty, a lot of this sounds very similar to Frank Farrelly's work. And I didn't realize until then how much I'd absorbed of what he teaches in terms of my own approach. From 2006, back around 2006, I was still teaching NLP courses because I'd been teaching practitioners, master practitioner courses from 2004 onwards, and a lot of them as well. I mean, I would do 2 practitioners per year, a master practitioner, at least 2 or 3 weekends, host Frank Farrelly, which I did from 2005, hosted Doug O'Brien most years, and even hosted people like John Lavelle, who some people will know as Bandler's co-trainer. So I'd had a lot of exposure with different people, and I started to develop a way of working which not only used Frank's approach, but also used a lot of the Ericksonian approaches, which I'd found hugely, hugely effective. And
so when you were doing that, you were hosting all those people, and obviously you were working with clients as well. How much time did you actually spend on like dedicated learning away from the therapy room, or did you find that was literally your learning zone?
I started seeing clients around 2006, around the same time as the BBC sessions. Up until that point, I was doing a lot of corporate training. I was doing a lot of public trainings.
Right.
I mean, at one point, I was doing public trainings around every 3 weeks. I'm doing a workshop. So in terms of learning, I still would attend trainings, but my view of learning is that it's important to learn from a whole multitude of different places, not just purely from sort of straight-ahead NLP courses. There are some great courses, but also a lot of the courses are a little bit like flat-pack furniture. You know, you assemble them, it's okay, it's not great.
It'll do.
It serves a function, and a lot of the time my criticism of courses was that you'd have sort of bits of information, especially in the accelerated courses, which in some cases were in real time, 6.5 days. Then you are deemed to be a practitioner. And it would be a little bit like, not to the same degree, but it had kind of a leaning towards that old Woody Allen joke where he says, you know, I took a course in speed reading, read War and Peace in 30 seconds. It's about Russia. So I think that I've always advocated the importance of learning from a multitude of different places, which means reading material, watching material, talking to people. In 2005, I set up the site nlpmp3.com and interviewed lots and lots of different trainers. On there, I've got Steve Andreas, I've got Michael Breen, I've got Paul McKenna, I've got Richard Bandler twice, I've got Frank Farrelly, I've got Michael Neal. This was, an opportunity for me to just talk to people independently outside of a seminar situation, and also to promote something which was not territorially tied into any one particular brand of NLP or institution. So, for example, Sue Knight's on there as well, Steve Andreas is on there, David Gordon's on there, Doug O'Brien's on there, Andrew T. Austin's on there, big range of different people.
Yeah.
The